So let's start with the first one. Today we'll be talking about leadership development as collaborative and connected. In the past, leadership development was all about the individual. In the future, I predict that the time that people spend working together, it's going to increase dramatically as a lot of the individual tasks are going to be reduced and taken over by AI. So what do we have to educate our leaders to do? Collaborate better. Right now, does leadership development do that? I don't think so, because most of the leadership development is hoping on your own, in your own individual office or room. So in the future, we predict and see that leadership development is going to become more collaborative, and we are going to instill the values of collaboration during the leadership development process itself. A good leader of the future in the age of AI is going to be a good collaborator. I was laughing when I said earlier that we don't have all the answers, but it is true. We can only find the answers if we look for them together. So how do some of the companies approach that problem of creating collaborative and connected leadership development?
Intuit is definitely one of the companies that does a great job with creating this collaborative environment. They really foster this community of leaders that keep going back to each other to get tips and tricks on how to educate their mentees, how to foster this development process. And one initiative that specifically stands out is the VP Leadership Lab. These individuals, mostly 5 to 7 VPs, come together to discuss the leadership principles that has been defined by Intuit, and then they solve case studies together, they provide guidance to one another, and really just create that sense of collaboration throughout their development journey.
So most of that work happens together. And Lau, does it always need to happen in person, or are there also digital environments for collaboration?
No, definitely not. There are a lot of initiatives and tools that we can cover in a bit as well, but now all sorts of collaboration is happening digitally as well. And Intuit, especially given that its size, they do these sorts of initiatives digital as well as in person.
So does it actually work, Sabrina? What do we know from neuroscience or cognitive psychology? Is this all rooted in some kind of science, or is this just trial and error?
It is rooted in science. Actually, when Lal was speaking, it reminded me of really building this culture of collaboration, which roots back to something that we all know a lot about, which is really this idea of social norms, formerly called social proof. So really, we are all motivated to act in the way that our colleagues, our peers are acting. We're driven by this idea of normative conformity. And so because of this, if we turn this around and instead of framing it as peer pressure, but framing it as this positive pressure to participate, and we frame development as something to actively get involved in, you build this interesting culture where leaders genuinely want to participate. So to answer your question, Anne, it is indeed backed by science, and especially cool that we can really drive this in a digital space as well, especially where our tech is going these days.
How do we do this? Are there any tools that actively leverage some of those scientific principles?
There definitely is. So one example that comes to mind, Nomadic, specifically uses the social pressure in a positive sense by creating these learning opportunities that are semi-asynchronous. So there is that flexibility that comes with that sort of a program, but all leaders are going through this process around the same 6 weeks. So they do have the social pressure to contribute to that conversation, keeping up with their development, so they feel a part of that. And then I know also something else that we're passionate about was how do you engage discussions, how do you engage communications. So HowSpace is this tool that fosters those kind of dynamic discussions by whether it's showing word clouds or by facilitating different discussions, moderating them. So there are all sorts of tools that foster that collaboration as well as make it more dynamic.
So here's our first direction for leadership development in the future: from instructive to constructive, and from isolated to collaborative and connected.